In August of 1993, deep in the Siberian wilderness, a group of Ukrainian kayakers made a haunting discovery. Stumbling out of the forest near the Irkutsk River, covered in blood and barely able to speak, was a 17-year-old girl named Valentina Utochenko. She had just emerged from the mountains, alone. What she survived would become one of Russia's most mysterious and disturbing tragedies. One that, to this day, still has no clear explanation. This is the story of the Khamar-Daban Mountain Deaths. There are places on Earth that seem beautiful at first, but hide something dangerous beneath the surface. One of those places is the Khamar-Daban mountain range in Southern Siberia. This area is full of tall trees, steep cliffs, and quiet lakes. The range stretches along the southeast of Lake Baikal, which is the oldest and deepest freshwater lake in the world. Many hikers visit this place because of its peaceful views and fresh air. Even though it looks calm, this mountain range is known for sudden weather changes. Storms can arrive without warning. Temperatures can drop below freezing, even in the middle of summer. Thick fog and strong winds often cover the trails. Hikers who come here are warned to respect the land. Local people have told old stories about strange things in the mountains. They say powerful spirits guard the area and can bring bad luck or worse to those who do not treat the mountains carefully. Over time, this quiet part of Russia has become the setting for stories full of fear and confusion. One of the strangest stories of all began in August 1993 when 7 hikers entered the Khamar-Daban Mountains. Only one came back. There have been other groups before who went into Russia's remote mountains and never came back. The Khamar-Daban tragedy was not the first, and it was not the only one filled with confusion. In 1959, a group of 9 young hikers died in the Ural Mountains under strange and unexplained conditions. That case became known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. Their tent was found ripped open from the inside. Some had no shoes. One person had a crushed skull. The mystery was never solved. Another group met a similar fate in 1973. 10 ski hikers from the Kuibyshev Aviation Institute died in the Lavozero Massif near Finland. All of them froze to death even though they were experienced and well prepared. Just like Dyatlov, no signs of a fight were found. It was as if something invisible had chased them. These tragedies happened in places where local people already warned travelers not to go. The Mansi tribe called Dyatlov's site Dead Mountain. The Sami people believed Lavozero was home to dangerous spirits. In the case of Khamar-Daban, the Buryat people told stories about powerful mountain guardians called Isanas. The Buryats believe these spirits protect the land and punish anyone who is careless or disrespectful. Some speak of a mysterious figure known as the Master of the Tiger. They say it can take the shape of a man, an animal, or even fog. It confuses travelers, leads them in circles, and then disappears, leaving them lost and afraid. 3 disasters, Dyatlov, Lavozero, and Khamar-Daban, happened in places tied to spiritual warnings. All 3 groups were experienced, and in all 3 cases no clear answer was ever found. What happened in August 1993 would be even more terrifying, because this time there was a survivor. Valentina Utochenko was only 17 years old, but she already knew how to survive in the wild. She had spent much of her young life hiking through the forests and mountains of southern Siberia. She was calm, confident, and physically strong. Nature felt like home to her. When the chance came to join a hiking trip through the Khamar-Daban range, Valentina said yes without a second thought. It was the middle of summer, and the group was made up of 7 people, including herself. Most of them were her friends. The group included Tamir Bapanov, just 15 years old, and Victoria Zalesova, who was 16. Valentina was next in age, followed by 19-year-old Denis Shvachkin. The oldest hikers were in their early 20s, Alexander Krisin and Tatiana Filipenko. All of them were used to hiking, and none of them were new to Siberia's wild terrain. But the person everyone respected the most was their leader, Lyudmila Korovina. She was 41 years old, and in their part of Russia, she was famous for her survival skills. People called her Master. She had trained dozens of students over the years and had completed many dangerous trips. Her daughter, Natalia, was also a skilled guide and was leading a second group that was hiking a similar path nearby. Valentina looked up to Korovina. She was strict, but she was also wise and caring. Valentina hoped to learn new skills on this trip, especially mushroom foraging, which Korovina knew very well. It was not just a hike, it was a chance to grow. The team prepared carefully. They packed warm clothing, plenty of food, emergency gear, and maps. The weather forecast said skies would be clear and they would be walking not far from the second group, which made them feel safer. Everyone was excited, everyone trusted their leader, and everyone believed they would come back with good memories. But what none of them knew was that this trip would soon become something else entirely, a terrifying journey that would end in confusion, panic, and death. For 6 of them, it would be the last time they would ever see the sun. The group left on their journey in early August 1993. They boarded a train to a small Siberian town called Slyudyanka, which rested near the base of the Khamar-Daban Mountains. From there, they would hike deep into the forest and eventually climb up into the high ridges. The weather seemed perfect at first. The sun was out, the air was crisp, and spirits were high. The group moved quickly along the trail, faster than expected. Valentina and her friends were laughing, taking pictures, and enjoying the peacefulness of nature. Their first major goal was to reach Retranslator Peak, one of the highest points along their route. They made it there ahead of schedule. That evening, they set up camp and cooked dinner, telling stories and sharing food as the wind whispered through the trees. From the top of the mountain, they could see a wide stretch of wilderness. Thick pine forests, twisting rivers, and steep cliffs surrounded them. To most people, it would have looked beautiful. To those who had grown up in the region, it was also a place to be careful. After the peak, they crossed a mountain pass known as the Longatai Gates. This was a narrow path between ridges that connected one side of the mountain range to the other. It was peaceful and quiet, but also known for sudden shifts in weather. From there, they moved along the Barangyong-Katuk River, staying close to the water for easy navigation. The hike was going smoothly, and because they were still ahead of schedule, the group took a short break on a high ridge of the Kanulu mountain. At 2,400 meters above sea level, the view was breathtaking. Valentina remembered that moment clearly. The peaceful silence, the soft clouds, the endless waves of green trees and grey stone. She felt proud. The hike was going well. Everyone seemed happy, but that feeling would not last long. On August 4th, the sky began to change. Thick clouds rolled in from the north. The air grew heavy, then came the wind, sharp and biting, cutting through their jackets and slowing their pace. It became difficult to speak and nearly impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. That night, they tried to set up camp along the exposed ridge, but the rain was freezing cold and the wind knocked over their tents. No fire could be built. No warmth could be found. They shivered together under thin sheets of plastic and wet clothing, waiting for morning. Still, there was hope. Their leader, Lyudmila Korovina, made a call to the weather station using a radio. The forecast said the weather would clear the next day. If they could just make it over the next ridge, they would meet Natalia's group, the second team, and rest together. But by the time morning came, something had already started to go wrong. August 5th began with a small sign of hope. The Dishtia group finally managed to build a fire. They warmed their hands, ate a simple breakfast, and prepared to move again. Valentina noticed that everyone looked tired. The freezing storm had left them weak, but still willing to push forward. They started, climbing the next ridge, hoping to meet the second group. But something felt wrong. The sky had not cleared as promised. Instead, it grew darker. Cold rain fell again, and the wind cut harder than before. It became a fight just to move forward. Valentina was near the middle of the line when she heard a sound that froze her in place. It was a scream, sharp, loud, and unlike anything she had heard before. She turned around and saw Alexander Krisin, one of the older boys, collapse to the ground. His body was shaking uncontrollably. Blood was coming from his eyes and ears. His mouth was foaming, and his limbs were twisting in strange, jerking motions. Then he stopped moving. Their leader, Lyudmila Korovina, rushed to him and dropped to her knees. She tried to help him, but seconds later her own body began to shake. Her eyes rolled back. Her arms flailed wildly. She let out a short gasp, then collapsed. Right on top of Alexander, Tatiana Filipenko, another older member of the group, began screaming next. She clutched her throat and gasped for air, as if she was suffocating. Then, in a sudden burst of madness, she ran toward a nearby rock and slammed her head against it again and again. Blood poured down her face. Then she, too, fell silent. Valentina was frozen. Her friends were dying in front of her, and she could not understand why. Two youngest hikers, Victoria Zalesova and Tamir Bapanov, panicked. They ran in opposite directions, screaming in fear, but they did not get far. Valentina saw both of them fall to the ground, clutching their stomachs. They began to vomit blood and tear at their own clothes, their faces twisted in pain. Then, still and quiet, Denis Shvachkin was the last one left. He grabbed Valentina's arm and the two of them began running down the slope. The mountain beneath them was steep and slippery. Rain and wind battered their faces, but they had no choice. Something was killing them, fast. They had not run far when Denis fell. He collapsed into the dirt and began to twitch, just like Alexander had. Valentina tried to help him. She held his hand, but within moments he stopped breathing. She was alone. Her mind went blank. She could not cry. She could not scream. She simply kept walking, not thinking about what had happened, only moving her feet. Cold air stung her skin, and mud soaked through her clothes. The pain kept her awake. The fear kept her silent. That night, she found a small patch of trees and set up her tent. Her hands shook as she zipped it shut. The forest was silent now. The only sounds were the soft howl of wind and the beating of her heart. At sunrise, Valentina did something that would surprise even her later. She climbed back up the slope. She knew she needed food, maps and supplies if she wanted to survive. Carefully, she returned to the place where her friends had died. Their bodies were still there, silent, cold, and scattered across the slope. She forced herself to stay calm. She took what she needed: a backpack, some food, one of the maps. Then she turned away from the scene and started walking downhill again. In the distance, she saw power lines stretching across the mountains. They gave her a small sense of direction. She knew they would lead somewhere, maybe a village, maybe a road. Each day, she walked slowly, eating small amounts of food and resting under trees. The weather stayed cold. Her shoes were soaked. Her legs hurt, but she kept going. By the fourth day, her strength was nearly gone. Her body was weak, and her mind was drifting. Still, she walked. Finally, on August 9th, she saw something moving near a river. It was a group of kayakers from Ukraine. They were on a holiday trip, paddling down the Irkutsk River. When they saw her, they stopped. Valentina was covered in mud and dried blood. Her lips were blue. Her eyes were wide. The kayakers thought she had been attacked by a wild animal. They wrapped her in blankets and rushed her to the nearest town. No one could believe what she had just survived. The kayakers did not waste a second. As soon as they reached the nearest village, they took Valentina to a small police station. From there, she was rushed to a local hospital. Doctors noted that she was pale, shaking, and clearly in shock. She could barely speak. She did not explain what happened. She only sat in silence, her eyes staring at the floor or out the window. Nurses tried to talk to her, but she did not respond. It was as if her voice had been left behind in the mountain. Valentina said nothing. She refused food and spoke only in short, broken phrases. Her body had survived, but her mind was still lost in the horror she had seen. Doctors diagnosed her with extreme trauma and exhaustion. Back at the police station, officers were confused. A teenage girl had come down from the Khamar-Daban Mountains alone, covered in blood, missing half her team, and no one knew why. At first, they did not believe her story. Some thought she was hallucinating. Others wondered if she had been attacked or was involved in something criminal. Still, the authorities waited for her to recover. Days later, Valentina finally began to speak. Slowly and quietly, she described what she had seen. Her words came in pieces: convulsions, blood, screams, and death. She talked about the cold wind and the broken tents. She told them that her friends had died one after another, and she told them that she had no idea what had caused it. Instead of providing answers, her story only brought more questions. Even then, officials did not act quickly. It was not until August 24th, nearly 2 full weeks after her rescue, that helicopters were sent out to search the mountains. The delay shocked many people, especially those who knew how fast weather and wild animals can damage evidence. Search teams flew over the Khamar-Daban range, scanning the landscape. Finally, after 2 more days of searching, they spotted something unusual on a rocky slope. It was the remains of a campsite, and around it were the lifeless bodies of Valentina's friends. The scene was just as she had described. The corpses were scattered across the slope. Some were missing parts of their clothing, others had torn jackets or no shoes. There were no signs of a struggle with animals, no cuts or wounds from weapons, only frozen, twisted bodies lying in the cold dirt. Investigators began to collect evidence. Autopsies were ordered, but no clear cause of death could be confirmed. For most of the victims, Valentina was not allowed to see the site again. She was told to rest, to recover, and to stop talking about it for now. She obeyed, but inside her mind, the images remained. The screams, the panic, the cold mountain, and the mystery that followed her home. The helicopter crew that first spotted the bodies reported something strange. The corpses were not lying together. They were scattered over a wide area, as if each person had died alone, far from the others. Their positions were unnatural, twisted, bent, and frozen mid-motion. Some hikers had blood around their mouths. Others had their shirts or jackets removed, even though the weather was still dangerously cold. One had a shoe missing, another had socks but no pants. It looked less like a camping accident and more like something had gone terribly, horribly wrong in a very short amount of time. Investigators arrived quickly. The weather was starting to shift again, and they knew they had little time before the cold would cover all signs. Rescue workers collected the bodies and brought them to a nearby medical center for autopsies. The results were confusing. Most of the victims showed signs of hypothermia, the official cause given in several reports. This is the condition where the body becomes too cold and begins to shut down. But there were other things that did not match the usual signs of freezing to death. All of the hikers had bruised lungs as if their bodies had suffered from strong pressure inside their chests. Some showed signs of pulmonary edema, which is a buildup of fluid in the lungs that makes it difficult to breathe. In the case of their leader, Lyudmila Korovina, doctors said she had died from heart failure. Her heart had simply stopped. Few of the hikers were found with protein deficiencies, a sign that their bodies were under great stress. They were not starving, but their systems had been weakened. The medical team said this might have made them more likely to die quickly from exposure. But even with these clues, the doctors could not explain the sudden collapse of 6 healthy hikers in such a short time. There were no signs of a fight, no animal tracks, no poisonous plants in their stomachs, and no chemical traces that pointed to poison, at least not from the tests done at the time. Many people had hoped that the autopsies would provide clear answers. Instead, they raised more questions. How could so many people die at once without a visible cause? Why was Valentina the only one who survived? And why did she describe things, blood, foam, screams, that did not appear in the final report? The answers were unclear. But one thing was certain. Something deadly had happened in the mountains, and it had happened fast. After the rescue, Valentina disappeared from the public eye. News of the tragedy made headlines across Russia, but she gave no interviews, she wrote no memoir, she stayed quiet. People whispered, some said she was trying to move on, others believed she had been told not to speak. In 1993, the Soviet Union had recently collapsed, and the region was in political chaos. Some even wondered if officials had pressured her to stay silent. Whatever the reason, for over 25 years, Valentina said nothing. Then, in 2018, a curious journalist from the Russian newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda tracked her down. She was still living in Russia. She had married, started a family, and tried to live a normal life. At first, she was angry. She asked the reporter why he would bring up such a nightmare. She said she had never even told her husband what truly happened in the mountains, but after some time her tone changed. She agreed to speak, carefully. What she described in 2018 was very different from what she told police in 1993. She talked about the cold. She mentioned the sudden panic. She said her friends had collapsed one by one, but there were no details. About blood coming from eyes, no screams, and no one hitting their head on rocks. It was quiet, calm, and vague. The new version felt empty. Some readers believed that she had grown older and was finally ready to speak the truth, the quiet version of it. Others believed the opposite, that she was still hiding something, that the full story was too dark, too strange, or too dangerous to tell. A few even pointed the finger at her. They asked how she could survive when 6 others had died. Some investigators had briefly considered her a suspect in 1993, but the idea had been dropped. Valentina was small, unarmed, and clearly terrified. There was no reason to think she had hurt anyone. Still, the questions remained. Why did her story change? What was she afraid of? And why, after all these years, did the truth feel even further away? Doctors and scientists who reviewed the case over the years searched for logical answers. There were no signs of violence, no weapons, no animal attacks. Most of the hikers were found with no clear injuries. Because of this, experts turned to nature. One of the first and simplest ideas was hypothermia. This is when the body becomes too cold to function. It causes confusion, memory loss, shaking, and even strange behavior like undressing. This could explain why some of the victims were found without clothing. In freezing weather, a person's brain can become confused. They may start to feel hot and take off layers, even though they are actually freezing to death. This is called paradoxical undressing. Some rescuers believed that was what happened to Valentina's group, but there were problems with this idea. Hypothermia usually kills slowly. The body shuts down over time, not all at once. Valentina said her friends died quickly, in minutes. Some were screaming and convulsing. One collapsed with blood coming from his eyes and mouth. That is not how hypothermia works. Another theory was altitude sickness. This happens when the body struggles to breathe in high places with thin air. It can cause headaches, confusion, and in some cases swelling in the brain or lungs. But altitude sickness usually affects people over time. It does not kill multiple people in the same moment. A few scientists looked more closely at the signs of pulmonary edema, the fluid found in the victims. This can be caused by stress, cold weather, or low oxygen. It also leads to foam in the mouth and difficulty breathing. This matched Valentina's first description of some of the deaths. Valentina later said she believed that pulmonary edema was the real cause. She said her friends were healthy, but once the storm hit, they may have panicked and overexerted themselves in thin air. Their lungs failed. Their hearts could not keep up. Still, even pulmonary edema did not explain the speed of death or the bleeding. It also did not explain why Valentina survived while everyone else died. That led some to wonder if the group had been poisoned. One idea was mushroom toxicity. Lyudmila Korovina was a known expert in wild foraging and had planned to teach the group how to gather edible plants and mushrooms. But even experts can make mistakes. Some wild mushrooms look safe but contain deadly toxins. Eating them can cause vomiting, seizures, heart problems, and death. There are even mushrooms that cause hallucinations, making people behave strangely before they die. If the group had eaten toxic mushrooms, that might explain the confusion, panic, and convulsions. It would also explain why Valentina survived. Maybe she ate less or skipped the meal. However, no toxic mushrooms were found in the victims' stomachs. The autopsy reports showed no clear trace of poisoning, but the bodies had been exposed to the elements for many days. Toxins might have broken down or become harder to detect. Another theory was contaminated water. The hikers drank from natural sources like rivers and lakes. Lake Baikal, though clean on the surface, has been used as a dumping ground for industrial waste in the past. Invisible chemicals or metals could have poisoned the group. Again, no strong evidence was found, but the idea remained. A more frightening explanation involved nerve agents, chemical weapons developed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Some of these deadly substances, like Novichok, were tested in remote parts of Russia. Symptoms of nerve agent poisoning include shaking, foaming, heart failure, and death, all matching Valentina's early story. Some even claimed there was a secret test site near the Khamar-Daban range. If the hikers had stepped into a contaminated area, they could have been poisoned without knowing it. But there is a problem with this theory too. The Khamar-Daban Mountains are not empty. Hikers visit the area often. It would be dangerous and foolish to test chemical weapons near such a public place. Every explanation had its limits. Hypothermia made sense, but not the speed. Altitude sickness matched the setting, but not the symptoms. Poison was possible, but not proven. Pulmonary edema explained the lungs, but not the bleeding. Nerve gas was a match for the signs. But would the government really hide such a thing? Scientists and doctors still cannot agree. The more they tried to explain the Khamar-Daban deaths, the more the mystery seemed to grow. Some investigators moved away from medical theories and looked at nature itself. The Khamar-Daban range is not just cold and remote. It is known for rare but dangerous weather patterns that can strike without warning. One of the most discussed ideas is the katabatic wind theory. This is a type of wind that forms when cold air suddenly rushes down from a mountain. It can happen in high places where temperature and air pressure change quickly. Katabatic winds are fast, powerful, and silent. In extreme cases, they move faster than a car. The wind can blow people off their feet, tear tents apart, and cause sudden drops in body temperature. Some researchers believe a violent katabatic wind might have hit the group during the storm. It could have sent the hikers into a panic. They might have run in different directions to escape the wind, lost each other, and died from cold and exhaustion. But Valentina never mentioned strong wind in her first report. And if the wind had been that strong, it likely would have torn apart their equipment and scattered their supplies, which were found mostly intact. Another rare idea is infrasound. Infrasound is a low-frequency sound wave that humans cannot hear, but our bodies can feel. It is created by natural sources like wind tunnels, earthquakes, or mountain ridges. When infrasound hits people, it can cause anxiety, nausea, dizziness, and even hallucinations. Some experts suggest that infrasound may have flowed through the valley during the storm. The sound could have triggered panic, confusion, and fear. The group might have believed they were in danger, even if nothing was physically threatening them. This theory was also suggested in the Dyatlov Pass case. Infrasound affects people in different ways. Some may feel nothing. Others may become sick or scared. If the group was tired, cold, and hungry, even a mild infrasound could have caused a mental breakdown. But again, there is no way to prove it. There are no devices that recorded sound waves at the time. Valentina never spoke of hearing or feeling anything strange. Still, Some believe her group might have walked directly into a pressure wave they could not see or hear. There is also the idea of environmental stress. The group had been hiking in extreme conditions: freezing rain, little sleep, wet clothing, thin air, long hours. All of it could have built up pressure on their bodies and minds. Even healthy people can lose control when their limits are pushed too far. What if there was no single cause? What if it was everything at once? Cold, fear, exhaustion, and altitude is crashing down in one terrifying moment. That may be the most realistic explanation. But if that is true, why did it only happen to them? Why not to the second group hiking nearby? And why has it never happened again? When science cannot explain something, people often turn to stories, the ones told in whispers, passed down by tribes or hidden in government files. The Khamar-Daban deaths left so many questions that it was only a matter of time before stranger theories appeared. Local legends go back hundreds of years. The Buryat people, native to this region, believe the mountains are watched over by powerful spirits called isanas. These spirits are said to punish those who do not show respect for the land. Some believe the hikers might have offended these beings in some way. There is also the tale of the master of the tiger, a shape-shifting force that moves through the forests as a man, a beast, or a cloud of mist. It plays tricks on travelers, confuses them, and leads them into danger before vanishing. Valentina spoke of fog, fear, and madness. Some wonder if this was more than just weather. Other stories come from deep beneath Lake Baikal. The lake is not far from where the group hiked. For generations, people have claimed to see strange lights, hear eerie sounds, or witness silver beings swimming deep under the water. Soviet divers once reported seeing humanoid creatures wearing shiny suits and helmets. These unknown swimmers were said to move faster than any human could. These stories sound like science fiction, but even the military took them seriously. Some believe the hikers may have seen something they were not supposed to, something unnatural, and paid the price. Then there is the theory of Soviet cover-ups. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Russia was in a time of change and confusion. Chemical weapons like Novichok, a deadly nerve agent, were being tested in remote places. These toxins can cause shaking, vomiting, blindness, and death, all within minutes. What if the group wandered into an old testing ground? What if there were still traces of poison in the soil, the water, or even the air? This theory could explain the sudden deaths, the bleeding, the convulsions, and the heart failure. But if it were true, it would be dangerous for the government. Covering it up would protect military secret and silence survivors. Valentina never spoke about strange beings. She never said anything about poison or ghosts. But her silence alone has caused many to wonder. What if she was warned? What if the truth was something no one was allowed to say? In the end, all of these ideas, from spirits to chemicals to strange creatures, share one thing in common. They leave behind more questions than answers. The Khamar-Daban Mountain Deaths remain one of the most haunting and unexplained tragedies in modern Russian history. 6 young hikers lost their lives in a matter of minutes. One survived, but her story only deepened the mystery. Every explanation, natural, medical, or supernatural, leaves something out. If it was the cold, why did death come so quickly? If it was poison, why was nothing found? If it was panic, why did it affect everyone all at once? The mountains have always stood as a border between the safe and the wild, between the known and the unknown. On that day, in August 1993, something crossed that border. Valentina Utochenko walked out of the forest with blood on her clothes and horror in her eyes. She was the only one who returned. And even now, after 30 years, her silence still speaks louder than any answer. Whatever happened in the Khamar-Daban range may never be fully understood. But the questions remain, echoing across the peaks, carried by the wind, waiting for someone to find the truth.